continue to rest. Use this time to re-energize. Use this time to revitalize the life energies. Allow the flame to grow bright and strong once again. Allow the connection with the spiritual realms to become stronger, clearer. And the next and final question, I would ask for very practical, worldly advice. Advice that can be of help and benefit. Assisting him, Henry Reed, in a very practical application of a new workshop or new program entitled The Intuitive Heart. How may he best apply the information for teaching, working with and guiding others? What practical guidance, what sound advice can be given at this time? We ask that the source of this practical advice, timely information, may come through. Please begin as you are ready.
Let us begin with a description of the work that Henry is currently involved in within himself, the work that has him in its grip. And this is the battle between envy and self-expression. As he looks around and he sees various people who appear to be quite successful as measured by being in the public eye and the recognition, the earnings and the attention and the approval. And he looks at these people and he envies them. And as he does that and looks and says, oh, why can't I be like them? Oh, what's wrong with me? And he looks at them and envies them. There is a hurt. There is a wounding that goes on in that. For as he envies others, he is denying his own worth. And he is engaged now in the practice of stopping that process of comparing himself like that. And when he sees somebody or an ad for their work or something, to generously and genuinely admire and acknowledge and cherish the wonderful and the beautiful that they are doing, and at the same time apply that genuine admiration and acceptance and honoring to his own work, to the value of it, to the intelligence behind it, to the usefulness of it. And rather than comparing the size of the following, the amount of attention or recognition, simply apply that honoring to the nurturing and the bringing of that work outward for others to share in and enjoy. It is not so much a matter of who is most admired, who is selling the most books, or getting onto TV, or getting the most bookings, but rather It is a matter of being able to use and appreciate what all these wonderful people are coming forth with, and learning and applying oneself to the challenge of allowing people to participate in the gifts that you have to offer. Thus, as he is making available the Intuitive Heart Workshop, he is learning and working with people to see what it is involved in the marketplace of ideas, in the scheme of things, to be available, to go out and share, and to help others with this work. So this is the lesson that he is working with as he puts the Intuitive Heart Workshop out there. Now, the origins of the Intuitive Heart theme was in itself an attempt on his part, by asking for guidance of how could he take these processes, insights, skills, and so on that he's been working with these so many years under the heading of psychic, and how could he share with people, how could he package it or put clothing on it in such a way that they would be able, given their backgrounds, their associations, to recognize the value of what he was doing in terms that they would appreciate. And the intuitive heart was that which was given to him out on a walk as to the term that would both be a channel well formed for the delivery of his insights, as well as clothing that would be well tailored for people to accept. And this applied to the workshop itself is that people very much long to be themselves, and yet at the same time they feel a need and sometimes are fearful of the meeting of this need to be accepted by the world. And so what he is going through himself has parallels with what everybody else goes through. Not so much in the sense, perhaps, that everybody is a would-be rock star and compares how many records they've sold with how many that other big stars have sold, but in the sense that everybody would like to be truly who they are out in the world, and yet have to find some way of packaging that, of dressing it up in such a way that it would be accepted. Some people experience this in terms of what job to go for. They have certain interests, they have certain skills. Maybe if left to their own devices, they would sew dresses or make model airplanes or go to parties, but they have to earn a living. And then they become teachers, or they become mechanics, or they become salesmen, because these draw upon those interests and provide services that the world is interested in supporting. So we have, you see, the inner and the outer. How can my inner being be out there in the world? How can I be connected out there and be fed by the outer world in such a way that it is true to my inner being, and the coming together of the inner and the outer? This is the realm of the intuitive heart. And so we would then suggest that besides these processes of attunement, of sharing, and so on, that there be some focus, explicit focus given then to this particular issue, which is universal in nature. If Buddha said that one of the 8 fears of mankind is speaking in public, where one's being themselves, and yet there's this audience that can be critical, if there was a fear of that way back then you know that the basic issues of living have not changed for some time. Now the forms, the institutions, the opportunities, and so on are changing a lot in appearances these days. So much change. And yet we're still faced with the recycling of energy, where we are engaged in looking for ways in which we can cycle our energies and thus make a living. Very much to making love, to creating. Although the forms of this have changed, this still is the essence of the task. And this is the domain in which the intuitive heart feels at home. Feels, this is my kind of business, this is my kind of stuff. I know about this. I can handle this. I enjoy it. So I would include that aspect. How can I be most truly me by being a part of the world? How can I be a part of this world in such a way that I am most truly me? We are coming to a time in which an old truth is going to have to be lived more apparently, more clearly, more overtly and directly. We may appear separate, but we're one. Our self is really not defined by our boundaries, but by the nature of our interconnections with others. We're used to thinking you can define John Doe or Mary because you're right here, and this is her shape, and this is where she starts, this is where she ends. These are what her attributes are. But we're going to be learning that John Doe and Mary are everywhere. And what distinguishes John as a soul from Mary as a soul is not the boundaries between the souls, but rather the different interconnections that they have, the different patterns of interconnections that they have with the world. John has chose to emphasize certain connections and de-emphasize others. Mary has chosen to emphasize other connections and de-emphasize others. Like an organ who pulls out certain stops and pushes in others, then various tones and overtones are emphasized and others are downplayed, and that's what gives the quality to that particular instrument. When the symphony plays, there's no way you can draw a boundary around the flute or the horn and say, there's the horn sound separate from the others. But yet you can recognize it in the harmony of things because of its particular pattern of overtones. And the sound of the horn now is unique because it is pulling in the trumpets and the other brass instruments. and it is in so much contrast to the string sounds. And now the violin is distinguishing itself because it is being emphasized by the lower strings and the reeds instruments, and standing apart from the sounds of the trumpets. Counterpoint to them. And the whole thus becomes enhanced by each individual. The one and the many. And this has been a theme with this person for a long time, going back to the Sundance theme of how each individual could be a part of the whole and contribute to the whole and find its individuality reflected, celebrated, and utilized without any the loneliness or the competition or the friction and conflict that we often associate with individuality. For we are coming at a time of great change where the chaos during this change will bring rise great powerful forces that will tend to want to make us the same, to make us uniform, where everybody needs to be politically correct in order to prove that they're not being subversive, that they're not harboring some particular value that some think contribute to the chaos, the change, and so on that we all fear. And we can see these signs already. Where, because a few have taken advantage of opportunities and to meet their own needs greedily and have hurt the rest, there become political forces to remove those opportunities from us and homogenize us. For in the natural evolution of things, individuality has been flowering as it must. And individual rights has created a revolution in our world. A revolution to the point now that the changes that are afoot are of such magnitude that there are many being so afraid would suppress that individuality. And so it is so important now that the various lines of teachings of the Sundance, of the intuitive heart, of interconnectedness, of the many and the one, of the hologram, of many, many of these images in which the one and the many are reflections of each other. And you can see many unique individualities all reflecting one common whole. That this alternative to the suppression of individuality will need to be and be very important to have it be taught, understood, practiced. People need to have experiences where, as a group, they are noticing, they're experiencing, they're living it out, that each person is, quote, doing their own thing. But because of the understanding of the hologram, the intuitive heart, the principle of interconnectedness, whatever the teaching is that they might be, the specific teaching they might be working with, everybody is doing their own thing in the context of a symphony that's playing. And their own things are interconnected and interrelated. And they discover that not only do I, by honoring somebody that seems a little bit goofy, a little bit strange, not only do I show them some compassion, but I help bring them into the group, and the group as a whole benefits. And by connecting my own individuality with the group, I am not suppressed. I do not lose my creativity. But in fact, I discover a whole new level of expressiveness, of rightness, of genius that I didn't even know was an attribute of my work because of how it fits in. This is something that everybody needs to experience. If people had more experiences operating as a group where each person was doing their own improvised, impromptu, intuitively inspired thing, as the group as a whole was working in some harmonious, integrated way, it would do wonders for the human family, for their confidence in themselves, their hope for the future, as well as a very life-affirming, very creative possibilities for our future. So the intuitive heart has not just inspirational or creative or psychotherapeutic implications, but there are very practical political implications as well for community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please rest now. Please relax the mind, the body, the spirit. Just rest now. Re-energize. You have done very well here today. You have opened in trust, in fullness, and in thankfulness. You have brought forth valuable information, understanding, guidance, and counsel. Is there any further insight, any further information that can be given at this time? Otherwise, we will soon begin the returning procedures.
This entity is making the discovery by working with this material that lies and deceit just don't work. And we mean nothing so harsh as criminal or hurtful types of lies and deceits, but where one is simply not being true to one's heart, where one is not being sincere, that the living in sincerity, in open sincerity, is what gives peace of mind and makes for a contented heart. Now, this is then bringing certain lifestyles or certain habit patterns or certain tendencies in relationships into question. Because certain manners or certain conveniences or constructions of living just pain one, are not consistent with this openness, with this truthfulness, with this sincerity that's being described. The intuitive heart can only be healthy when it is lived in truth and honesty. For to do otherwise creates a crimping that inhibits the living of this. Now there is a creative tension that is created by this reality. And that creative attention is in a relationship. What one person does affects another. And we want for the happiness and joy of the other person as much as we want for our own, because when the other person is unhappy, we are unhappy. And to do for the other person, or to arrange things so that the other person is happy, loved, respected, and cared for is very important. At the same time, those things that are done or said or felt on that regard have to also be consistent with oneself and being true to one's own needs. And sometimes it's such that doing or acting in a way that's most respectful of another person may not seem to be the most consistent or sincere with what oneself feels that one needs or wants. And so we have that inner and that outer tension. Now, what we have found in the past as to being so important to the growth of a creative resolution of that or use of that tension has been communication. Communicate, discuss, and in the communication, consciousness increases and grows. And life then having a way of developing the means, the paths for a very creative resolution or integration of the apparent contradictions, conflicts, or differences. In a given life, in a given relationship, this can prove to be a very long-term, very poignant, very delicate, very heartfelt, very impactful type of situation. And the intuitive heart, above all, is loving and compassionate, and in that, slow to judge or criticize. It finds it reaches out to all the facts, all the truths. And sometimes the best that can be said is, you may know what it is that you want, but you may not be ready yet to do those things that would actualize that. And maybe you can accept that and live with that. That would be the wisest. And wait for the change of the season. Now this entity has experienced a number of times the imagery of death by hanging, and fears sometimes that he's harboring some kind of a death wish or a suicide plan. And recognized here recently that this is also a dream or an image of a process, as in the tarot, of the hanged man who was in suspended animation, caught frozen between the dead space of opposing, changing forces. And he had the image that he had heard about of a person who was hung having an orgasm at the point of death. And this being symbolic of the acceptance, at the time of acceptance, that one must surrender to the opposing forces. One must surrender to the state of suspension. That this surrender releases creativity and new life into the situation. And then one is free, or but has to simply enjoy the writing out of the implications of the new life unfolding. And what once seemed like impossible barriers to overcome seem less insurmountable. And remember, Christmas and all that came of the first Christmas. And you think of all the blessings that ultimately came from that first Christmas. That first Christmas just began with a little dot of light. And that dot of light was recognized. It was honored. Gifts were brought. And day by day, that dot of light grew and developed and gave forth a whole new way of life. So the intuitive heart knows and recognizes the dot of light when it appears. And without rushing things, but with awareness and patience, notices, acknowledges, blesses, and nurtures that dot of light as it, in its own time, gives forth light in abundance and a whole new way of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, please rest the body, rest the mind and the soul, rest the entire being. Thank you for that final communication and guidance. Prepare now, in a little while, for the returning procedure and the return process. You can take all the time you wish. There is no rush. Allow the flame of life to normalize. Allow the blue-violet flame, the spiritual light, to normalize. Releasing the connection now to the higher spiritual realms. Allowing total normalization at every level of your being. Remember to bring the information back with you, which will be of most help and benefit. Remember to take time and make time in the weeks and months ahead to continue the work of going within, the work of connecting with the higher spiritual realms, with friends and loved ones from the spiritual plane who can assist you and guide you for the full realization of your soul's potential and the potential of the present life. Allow balance and harmony to come into your life. Allow yourself to become a finer tool, a finer vessel for the workings of the spiritual friends and loved ones, counselors and guides from the highest realms, to guide you and assist you, to help you in this workshop, in the teaching for all humanity of the intuitive heart. Bring back with you the vision, the art, the beauty of this also. Bring back especially the feeling of the peace and compassion that comes as a natural gift from opening the intuitive heart and touching that deeper connection with all humanity and with all of life. Rest now, balance, attune, and prepare slowly for the journey back, bringing back all that which is helpful and beneficial. I will not do a specific counting procedure. Rather, use the breath now to bring in the life energies with each and every breath, bringing forth the life forces to re-energize, revitalize at every level. Coming back very slowly, coming up very slowly. You may wish to move hands or feet or neck, and begin now the process of coming up, coming back. That was good, Henry.
Yeah. Well,
nice session.
Yeah.
Some good work, some valuable
Mhm.
information.
I like the singing. The singing, I think, it's been now 3 years or so since the smoking ended,
Right.
and the breathing and the voice and so on, so there can be more enjoyment, with it's somehow it's allowing the feelings to express somehow in the vibration of the voice. It's not
Right.
so much being the great singer type of a notion as being able to. It's like you have an instrument to express feeling with somehow, and you're going, oh, you're getting to enjoy that good feeling. That's what a kid does,
Yeah.
they make all those noises. And then as that starts happening, it can really start feeling the consciousness moving. And all of that chanting, or whatever you want to call it, I could feel it positioning me,
Good.
and getting me ready to be more receptive and in a certain kind of a modality.
I think this work that we call channeling, a form of connecting with our higher self, I think it really is as much connecting with our innocence.
Yeah.
It's going to that original innocence, or
Right.
that original grace that we have,
Uh-huh.
and trusting that, and being comfortable to sing and hum and chant and tone.
Yeah, yeah. And I was really surprised when this song came out about the intuitive heart, and it was coming, a little song coming, and the rhyming and everything. And when I do the workshop sometimes, and I have the people make all these sounds and chanting and everything, and they do the inspirational writing, and a couple of people will stand up and they'll read what they wrote, and they have all this rhyme stuff that spontaneously came about. And I'm still really fascinated by what is this state of consciousness that we can get into, and I guess rappers must get into that space too, where the ideas come out very naturally in a rhymed, rhythmic kind of way. It must be a very special a state of mind,
Poetry and rhythm are one of the languages of the subconscious. It comes through that way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. It'd be nice to see some research, but it's common.
And I thought about that while I was there, with also the idea of the heart that pulses, because it pulses with a certain rhythm. And I'm wondering if, the rhythm of life, the pulse of life, rhythm, vibration, music, rhyming, and so on, aren't all of a piece somehow.
Yeah, a natural beat.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thanks for
You're very
taking me
welcome.
through that. That was really, I feel really good afterwards.
All righty.
It felt very good.
It seemed compared to our earlier years, it seemed a lot more, I want to get the right word, but there was a lot more understanding to it. It wasn't as jerky as some of the earlier sessions when we weren't clear of all of how we could work well together. And now it seems like we have a good set procedure, and we understand the timing better, and we understand the opening process.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
Well, it was, it was the induction that you gave was much different than what I had in mind when I was describing these things, and yet as it was happening, it seemed so right and so perfect and everything. It was really neat.
I didn't have a plan.
I know. We just sort of talked about it, and
Yeah.
a little bit, and then it went.
Right.
Okay.
All righty. Well,